All right, the Clinton News Network, which is constantly competing with NBC News to be the most anti-Trump news outlet in the country, is under fire yet again, once again pushing fake news. Now, 3 employees supposedly resigned last night after the network had to retract a completely false story about a Trump ally, friend of mine, Anthony Scaramucci, claiming that he was being investigated for colluding with the Russians through dealings with a Russian investment fund. Now, President Trump rightly slammed CNN once again and the rest of the Destroy Trump media on Twitter today, writing, quote, "Fake news, CNN is looking at big management changes now that they got caught falsely pushing their phony Russia stories, and ratings are way down." The president continued. So they caught fake news, CNN cold, but what about NBC, CBS, ABC? What about the failing New York Times and Washington Post? They're all fake news. Now, CNN is claiming that the only reason this hit piece article was published was because, quote, standard editorial processes were not followed. Now, CNN may want to review those so-called editorial process that they have, because they've been forced to now retract several other fake news stories, in other words, lies to the American people, in just the past month alone. For example, on June 16th, CNN, well, they had to delete a tweet and issue a correction for claiming that only Democrats were praying before the congressional baseball game. I was there. Not true. And just before, one day before that, CNN's senior White House correspondent, the very angry Jim Acosta, tweeted and then had to remove fake news about President Trump not visiting Congressman Steve Scalise in the hospital. Of course, that's not all. Earlier this month, before the former FBI director James Comey's congressional testimony, well, CNN had to again change a story that falsely stated that Comey would contradict President Trump's statements about not being under investigation by the FBI. Now, all that appears to just be the beginning of the network's problems, because today, James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, well, they came out with a new video that apparently shows a CNN producer admitting the network's massive anti-Trump agenda. Now, Fox News has not been able to independently verify the content of the video, but here are some of the key parts. Take a look.
Why is CNN constantly like, Russia this, Russia that?
Because it's ratings.
Because it's ratings?
Our ratings are incredible right now. My boss, a couple days yesterday, we were having a discussion about this dental shoot, and he's like, I just want you to know what we're up against here. And he goes, just to give you some context, President Trump pulled out of the climate accords, and for a day and a half we covered the climate accords, and the CEO of CNN said in our internal meeting, he said, good job everybody covering the climate accords, but we're done with it, let's get back to Russia.
the CEO?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So even the climate accords, he was like, okay, a day or so, but we're moving back to Russia.
I think that there are a lot of like liberal CNN viewers who want to see Trump really get scrutinized, and I think if we would have behaved that way with President Obama and scrutinized everything that he was doing with as much scrutiny as we applied to Donald Trump, I think our viewers would have been turned off.
But honestly, you'd think the whole Russia is just like...
Could be. I mean, it's mostly right now. Like, we don't have any big giant proof. But then they say, well, there's still an investigation going on. And you're like, yeah. I don't know. If you were finding something, you would know about it. The way these leaks happen, they'd leak it. It'd leak. If there was something really good, it would leak. And so I think the president is probably right to say, like, look, you are witch hunting me. Like, you have no smoking gun. You have no real proof.
Now, in response to this very damning video, CNN issued a short statement. It read in part, quote, CNN stands by our medical producer. Diversity of personal opinion is what makes CNN strong. We welcome it. We embrace it. Well, I'm actually glad this producer will not be losing his job simply for being honest and truthful. But here's what's so ridiculous about that statement. CNN didn't address, they didn't even bother to react to the network president, Jeff Zucker's comments about, quote, getting back to Russia and using the false Russia collusion conspiracy theory to drive up ratings for money. And by the way, the blame on all this should be at the feet of Jeff Zucker. And if anyone faces consequences here, it should be Zucker. As we have explained, Zucker is the person who is overseeing and steering CNN and the Destroy Trump fake news coverage over there. And here's the funny part. Take a look at this headline from earlier this month. Jeff Zucker's viewers trust CNN more than ever. Only someone like Zucker, who leads a fake news network that constantly pushes conspiracy theories and fake news, it's bizarre he tried to make that claim. CNN has now gone overboard. They've jumped the shark. They're completely biased. And by the way, they are now one of the preeminent pushers of the fake news propaganda in the country today. They have an agenda, take down the president. Look at a recent Harvard study of all places. From January 20th until the end of April, 93%, a whopping 93% of CNN's coverage of President Trump was negative. Now, I said last night on Twitter that I think Zucker, he needs to face the consequences. He is a left-wing ideologue. He doesn't care about facts or truth or getting any stories right. He is a Trump-hating political operative who's pretending to be the president of an unbiased news network. Well, with all due respect, as you know, Zucker and CNN are not alone. Now, the mainstream, Destroy Trump media, so-called journalists, there's a ton of them. And here's more proof, by the way, of exactly what we've been exposing. Our friends over Media Research and their center have put together this chart analyzing ABC, NBC, CBS, and their newscasts for over a month. What did the MRC find? Well, that the newscasts have a clear obsession over Trump, Russia, Comey, and the investigation, despite, of course, no evidence so far of any actual wrongdoing. Now, instead of obsessing over fake news, Russia collusion, conspiracy theories, black helicopter theories, the Destroy Trump media should be focusing on real scandals that they have been ignoring for months. We have been covering them. Here are the top 6. James Comey, remember, had his friend leak the memo to the New York Times to bring about a special counsel. Now, Comey may have committed a crime by unlawfully removing FBI property, which could be a violation of the Federal Records Act. And according to Judicial Watch, by the way, Loretta Lynch, look at her, obstructing justice. Bipartisan group of senators, now they're calling for an investigation into this. Why isn't the media? Remember, Lynch told Comey to call the Clinton email investigation a matter. By the way, Clinton talking points. And we also know that Lynch met Bill Clinton on a tarmac for 40 minutes before Comey let Hillary go free. And by the way, after saying she was extremely careless in her handling of top secret and classified information and destroying classified information. Now, also, number 3, speaking of Hillary, her email server that we just described, well, that deserves an investigation and, frankly, a grand jury, because, as we've been explaining, the original one was compromised by Comey and Lynch. And then, of course, number 4, there's also the Clinton-Russia collusion Uranium One deal, real collusion. Hillary, Secretary of State, signed off 20% America's uranium going to Vladimir Putin, the foundational material for a nuclear weapon. And while people who were involved in that deal, by the way, at the same time, are kicking back millions of dollars to the Clinton Foundation, and her husband's doubling his speaking fees in Moscow. Now, the only law in this case that we know was broken in this whole Russia collusion story was, of course, the unmasking and the leaking of intelligence against Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, and he's paid a price for that. That's a felony, a violation. That's the Espionage Act. And finally, number 6, Special Counsel Mueller. His inexcusable, his illegal, many conflicts of interest and investigative creep here. And, of course, Mueller, best friends with Comey, also members of Mueller's team. Let's see, he picks one of Hillary's lawyers and picks people that donated to Obama and Hillary Clinton to investigate Donald Trump? Are you serious? And one of the lawyers that represented the Clinton Foundation. Now, those are the stories we're helping the media hear. Those are the scandals that the media should be focused on instead of the destroying of the president, like CNN, like NBC, like the major networks, like the Washington Post and the New York Times. Here with reaction to all of this, Editor-in-Chief, Life Zet, Fox News contributor, nationally syndicated talk show host. She's actually funny occasionally, Laura Ingraham. How are you?
Hannity, I can't believe that in that litany of the past sins of CNN, you forgot one of the best that you've talked about in the past so often. I can't believe it. You forgot the Donna Brazile sending questions from Roland Martin in advance to Bernie Sanders.
The WikiLeaks showed they all colluded with Hillary.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, that was a classic one, wasn't that? Was almost more than a year ago. It was in March of 2016.
I stand corrected. But that's not a crime. The other ones, I think, are crime or you've got real ethical problems.
Right. Well, she ultimately resigned from the network in the fall. But remember, CNN stood by and claimed that none of that was true. And despite the fact that WikiLeaks had the thread that they published in October showing that, in fact, she said from time to time I get questions in advance, et cetera, and sent them on. That's just another in a long list of problems that CNN has had. And I was theorizing today in LifeZette, which you can read the story on lifezette.com, that Jeff Zucker received a lot of criticism. He's the president of CNN. He received an enormous amount of criticism, Sean, for airing so many of the Trump rallies during the campaign. And you do get the sense that this obsession with Russia now is there's something that seems like it's like almost atoning for the past sin of giving Donald Trump such a wide platform during the campaign, because he's been slammed by the left. And since the victory by Donald Trump, he's had to go to Harvard at some symposium in Harvard where all these students are getting up and complaining about CNN. You get the sense that he's trying to make me laugh. Like major expiation. Yeah.
All right. But, you know, I wasn't actually going to run. And I told James O'Keefe this. I admire his work a lot, and he gets unfairly tarnished because he's done a lot of good work over the years. And I almost didn't want to run it until they put out a statement. I thought they were going to fire this poor guy for just speaking honestly and truthfully. And I was actually looking and making calls today in case he got fired to try and find the poor guy a job. But now that they're not going to fire him, this says a lot about Zucker. This identifies what his agenda is. Why would Time Warner keep an obviously abusively biased leader that's destroying their brand and in a witch hunt for the president?
I don't see how any of this really makes sense. I think that CNN has some good reporters. I think there are people over there who want to do a good job.
Like who?
I don't want to tar the whole place. Well, let me work on thinking of the list by the end of the segment. I'll come up with it. But I don't think.
Okay, I'm glad they all top of mind to you. They have good people. I can't think of one now, but I'll tell you later.
I will say this. I've always actually liked Jake Tapper, and I like Wolf Blitzer. I mean, I really do like both of them. I think I think Trump has changed a lot of these people. I think they're probably Democrats. I'm sure they're Democrats, but I don't know for a fact, but I imagine they are. But I do think the victory of Trump really has been a difficult hurdle, intellectual hurdle, political hurdle, journalistic hurdle for these people to clear. I really think they're having trouble. They're having trouble functioning. And I know they're upset. They want more access. I get all that. But this stuff, at least they push these three reporters out. But I think this is the tip of the iceberg. And they've had a lot of problems they're going to have to deal with.
All right, so if we take my list of 6, and yes, I'll add WikiLeaks exposing the collusion. Yes, Madam Ingram, you are correct. I think that is important.
Yeah.
All right, but there's a part of me that is like, wow, they're missing some of the biggest stories that we've ever seen or ever covered in our careers here. And they won't do it because they're so fixated on hating a president. Their agenda is clearly to take this president down. That's not journalism anymore, Laura. There's a real serious psychology to whatever it is that's going on at these so-called news networks.
You know what I think a lot of it is also, Alan Dershowitz tapped in on this on my radio show this week, Sean. He said something very interesting. He said, when he's like in Martha's Vineyard, where it's all Democrats, mostly Democrats, and he's on the porch of this general store in Chilmark where he has this luncheon, he has lunch, a sandwich every couple times a week, I guess. He said all of these liberals who are his friends are just enraged that he's coming out and saying what he's saying about the obstruction of justice, no collusion, no obstruction when it comes to Trump. He said, they said, like, we got to get him. These well-known liberals, we got to get him. What are you doing? You're a liberal. He said, yeah, I voted for Hillary Clinton, but you guys have to beat him at the ballot box. And I think that's the same thing with the journalists. They've become activists. They've become participants in the political wars instead of journalists covering serious stories. And if they want to cover Russia, fine, cover Russia. But they ought to cover what's happening inside of the government when we have intelligence officials leaking critical information or illegally leaking information that is either false or not advancing any whistleblower interest whatsoever because they're not actually going to get whistleblower protections. These are people who are just deciding they don't like Trump and they want to take him out. That is not journalism. That's something very different. And I think if it were the shoe were on the other foot, they would be wailing about it.
Laura, thank you. When we come back. Welcome back to Hannity. So over the past few weeks, CNN has really made great strides in solidifying their position as one of America's premier fake news networks. Now, naturally, one of its top pushers of fake news is none other than the so arrogant, combative, and frankly whiny senior White House correspondent Jim Acosta. And now that the administration is forcing Acosta out of the spotlight by hosting a few audio-only press briefings because they only want to play gotcha, well, CNN's White House darling is really starting to become unhinged, kind of like Liberal Joe. And that is the subject of tonight's mini monologue. So, like a plant needs sunlight, Jim Acosta apparently needs a camera, and during yesterday's audio-only press briefing, a clearly shaken Acosta demanded Sean Spicer turn those cameras back on. Listen to the arrogance.
There's no camera on, Jim.
But maybe we should turn the cameras on, Sean. Why don't we turn the cameras on?
Jen.
Why don't we turn the cameers on?
I'm sorry that you have to do. Jen, go ahead.
Why not turn the cameras on, Sean? They're in the room. The lights are on.
Olivier.
Do we have cameras on the president? Hold the press for you, Sean.
First one is Senator Corker.
We'll continue to mix things up.
Why are the cameras off, Sean?
Try.
Why did you turn them off? Can you just give us an answer to that? Can you tell us why you turned the cameras off? Why are they off, Sean?
It's a legitimate question.
It's a legitimate question. You are a taxpayer-funded spokesman for the United States government. Can you at least give us an explanation as to why the cameras are off?
All right, don't let the exchange fool you. Acosta's mission extends far beyond just getting Sean Spicer to turn the cameras back on during a press briefing. In fact, it appears that Acosta is very much in line with his colleagues at CNN, led by Jeff Zucker, who are using fake news now as a political weapon against the Trump administration. For example, as we told you earlier, Acosta was forced to delete a tweet earlier this month after he claimed that President Trump did not visit Congressman Steve Scalise when he was in the hospital. Turns out, totally fake news. And that misguided tweet is only one of many examples of what is now a pattern: Acosta's corrosive coverage and biased coverage of President Trump. Now, sadly, for a White House correspondent claiming to be an unbiased journalist, Acosta has a pretty extensive history of trashing the Trump administration. Isn't he supposed to be objective and fair and balanced, including multiple combative exchanges with Sean Spicer, White House officials, and even the president? Why? So he gets to look good for himself on camera. Is he really looking for answers to questions for you, the American people? We'll let you decide.
It's like we're just covering bad reality television is what it feels like now. The White House press secretary is getting to a point, Brooke, where he's just kind of useless.
There was surveillance that was done on a variety of people that came up.
Well,
how do you, Jim, I find it interesting that you somehow believe that you...
Of course they're going to be looking at these various things.
Okay, I get it.
Since you're attacking us, can you give us a question? Mr. President-elect.
Go ahead.
President-elect, since you are attacking our news organization, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
You are attacking our news organization.
Your organization
Can you give us a chance to ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can you state... Mr. President-elect,
go ahead.
Can you state categorically...
Mr.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be rude.
You're attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically...
You are fake news.
Sir.
You are fake news. You're very fake news. Well, Jim Acosta is very sensitive. And by the way, he gladly is doing the bidding of his boss, Jeff Zucker. And by the way, he goes to battle on behest of Zucker against the administration day after day. So instead of digging for truth and trying to get information for the American people, well, he's just digging at the administration, clearly with an agenda. Instead of looking for answers, Acosta, he's looking for ways to damage the president, prop himself up. Now, the sad reality here is that, like the rest of all of these fake news networks, in this case, CNN, senior White House correspondent, he'll do anything in his power to prevent the president from implementing his agenda. That's not good for you, the American people, now is it?
A few years ago, Seattle raised its minimum wage to $15 an hour. Liberals applauded, as trained, but some of us wise ones knew better. Minimum wage is designed for entry-level, teens, people who just start in the workforce. It was never originally meant for heads of households supporting families, which may be there. And it may be a tiny percentage, but this is basically for people who want to move up. If you raise that rung, then you have to raise all the other rungs. That causes more pain for the small businesses because he has to raise everybody's salary. The end result is you take a pie that used to have 8 slices, and now you've made it 6 slices. You've eliminated 2 jobs, which is why pizza joints are closing in Washington.
Dissolved.
Good-looking guy. And smart, for as predicted, the wage hike killed over 6,300 jobs and slashed wages by $125 per month in 2016 in Washington. That's from a new study by the National Bureau of Economic Research. It's real. What the Washington Post calls, quote, bad news for liberals. No, not workers, but liberals. That's their first instinct, to worry about liberals. They're such jerks. But anyone outside the Post could have seen this coming. Let's say a shop has 8 jobs at $7.50 an hour, and you double the salaries. If the budget remains constant, you got to cut 4 workers. That's math. The media and Dems, they know math, but they pretend not to.
One constant in the last 10 years have been the Republicans in Congress who are standing in the way of raising the minimum wage.
We have got to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. If you work 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty.
I'm very honored to join the fight for 15. This is a living wage. We're proud of what we've done in California. I know that distinguished Senator Murray is proud of Washington State, but we want that to happen in the whole country.
Their combined age is 800. So they accept long-term hardship in return for immediate feel-good sentiment, to be part of the compassionate club, even if the club hurts others. The result, they shrink the job pool and future opportunities. After all, these jobs aren't for a person to stay put, but to give them a head start. When I was young, I knew that first crappy paycheck was temporary. Hell, my job title was temp. But somehow the Dems believe the first rung is also the last rung. And then you're the bad guy for saying no. But we know you can't get to the second rung without a first. And making that first rung too expensive only means more automation. See McDonald's. Remember the sign, no shoes, no shirt, no service? With automation, it's no salary, no benefits, no humans. You know, Kimberly, I hate having to point out that I was right. I would rather be wrong.
You're brilliant.
I wish you could pay more at entry-level positions and have more jobs. But math says no.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful, and we want people to do well. We want families to be able to feed their children and to pay for education, and for people to be able to leave something to their loved ones because they've been able to live the American dream in this country. It's really what we all want. But what is the best vehicle by which to achieve that? Is it by making this, mandatory minimum wage and raising it? Well, no, the economics don't prove through. The math isn't the one that supports that kind of theory. And in fact, it's really, in my opinion, I think it operates as like an unfunded mandate on small businesses. And mandates do not work. It only hurts job creation and tells businesses that want to be entrepreneurs and small businesses, hey, sorry, unless you can do this and subsidize the United States economy, you can't live your American dream.
Yeah. Richard, I think the thing that people forget about is if you raise the minimum wage and that in a business that matches, say, somebody on the upper level, then you've got to give everybody else a raise, because you can't have like a 16-year-old making 15 when the 16-year-old's manager is making 15. You follow me?
I follow,
Yes.
but I don't agree with your mathematics on that.
All right. You don't have to.
No, I know.
You'd be wrong. But...
I know I don't. I know I don't. No, here's my thoughts on this. Don't get me wrong. I think that we have to do some tinkering with this, right? But I think here's what we know to be true. When you most of the people who are on minimum wage, who are the head of household, which is quite a number of Americans.
Small number.
No, it's a lot larger than you think
it's part of the whole group.
All right, and what we know is this, and so when you're taking care of your family, that extra money always goes right back into the economy. So usually what you see when you raise the minimum wage, like when George Bush did it, which is the last president to raise the minimum wage, you see an uptick in economic growth because they have less disposable. They spend all the money they get as soon as they get it because they have to make ends meet. And so we have to create a system where that's not the case. And I don't think the business model of not raising the wage works on this one.
All right, Dana.
Well, I would say that the federal minimum wage is what they were talking about there, and it was minimal, but there's not that many people that work in the federal government for minimum wage. Also, the other thing I would say is that in the editorial, the Washington Post talks about that there was bad news for liberals, and you mentioned workers, but they also don't say it's bad news for the employers, because they actually showed in this study that there was an economic impact for those employers. So basically, that you have to make a decision on whether you're going to close your business or not.
Jesse?
I think Democrats always get burned by their own good intentions. You know, when you raise a minimum wage, you make poor people poorer. You pull out of Iraq, you create ISIS. You enact Obamacare, you raise premiums. You open the borders, it makes people less safe. And you expand welfare, it destroys the family, and it makes people more dependent. Democrats always throw more money at things as the solution, but what happens is more money, more problems. I forget who said that. Someone at this, I don't know. Also, you know, the Democrats don't understand basic mathematics. Capitalism is not a charity case. Capitalism exists to provide goods and services to people and make profits for businesses.
Free market.
Minimum wage is a stepping stone. You want to be able to first flip burgers and then flip houses. It's not the end result.
Very good. All right. Well, an investigation by the Daily Caller has revealed that a high-profile anti-Muslim hate crime in Milwaukee is apparently anything but a hate crime. On April 10th of this year, a 58-year-old woman was attacked while leaving a prayer service at the Islamic Society of Milwaukee. Even though police didn't immediately make an arrest in the case, and still haven't, in fact, it was immediately denounced as a hate crime by at least one local official, as well as many pro-Muslim organizations, including, of course, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which vocally denounced the Trump administration's failure to respond to the attack. You've seen this story before. But according to the actual police report, which apparently nobody bothered to read, the victim of the attack repeatedly denied it was a hate crime. Instead, she believed the attack was related to the behavior of her daughter, who recently left her husband to enter a relationship with another woman. The woman disapproves of her daughter's same-sex relationship and believed this disapproval may have somehow provoked the attack. It's complex, but it's not what it was represented as. Now, there have been a lot of bogus hate crimes since last fall's election, a lot, and we've covered several of them. But this is a new low. Activist groups with an agenda making up a hate crime even as the supposed victim actively denies it is a hate crime. Raheel Raza is a Muslim woman. She supports President Trump's recently preserved travel ban, and she joins us now. Thanks a lot for joining us. So first to the hate crime question, it does seem like there was this spate of hate crimes reported in the media against American Muslims, and to the extent that we have looked into any of them, some perhaps are real, some are not real, but it does seem like there's a political agenda behind the reporting of these so-called crimes. Have you noticed this?
Yes, I have noticed that. Of course, anytime there is a hate crime against any group, we have to speak out because that is definitely not acceptable. Racism and bigotry is unacceptable. However, in this particular case, the victim consistently said that this was not based on her religion and it was a personal issue, as you mentioned about with her daughter. But organizations like CARE, who we know love to play the victim card. They love to promote the idea that there is rampant Islamophobia and that Muslims are being bashed on the streets of the United States. That's another extreme. We have to, of course, speak out when there is hate, but when there is, that is not the intention, and when that is not the true cause, then we have to be very cautious of the kind of messaging that they are putting across.
Yeah, lying is always bad, and in the service of politics, it's ominous.
Yeah.
So you've been a rare voice as a Muslim in support, or maybe qualified support, of the so-called travel ban the administration has put through. Why?
Well, I call it a moratorium, which is a temporary stoppage, because 5 of the countries which I mentioned are failed states. Iran, of course, is an issue by itself, has been at perpetual war with the United States. But the other 5 are failed states. They have internal conflicts, radicalization, jihadism, and they could combust at any moment. So they are a threat. And as a precautionary measure, it makes sense to stop immigration temporarily from those countries until the national security of the country can be sorted out. And it is in the longer, large-term interest of national security to actually implement this moratorium.
It seems like, I don't even understand this argument, but tell me if you've heard it and perhaps you can explain it. People are saying on the left that this temporary travel ban would somehow make this country more dangerous, would imperil us more. Do you believe there is any merit to that argument?
No, I don't. I mean, these are all, those people who have knee-jerk reactions. It is being done to actually strengthen the national security of the country, because we only have to look back at this past year and see the number of attacks that have taken place. So obviously there is a problem out there of radical Islamist terrorism, and it has to be addressed. And especially those people who say that this is about religion. It's not. I'm a practicing observant Sunni Muslim. For me, this is about region and not religion. And I support the ban because it sends a very strong message to those countries who want to ship their terrorists to the West and have them do destruction here.
So really quickly, why would people attack this ban so vehemently? I mean, you see many people on the left legitimately upset, emotional about it. Why?
Yes, I know, because they have an emotional reaction against the man, not against the vision and against the office of the President of the United States, who has every right to implement policies that are for the betterment of the country and the people of America, which includes Muslims. So they have to be more sensible instead of having these emotional knee-jerk reactions, exactly as you said. So this, no matter what he says or does, there is going to be this emotional reaction. But we need to take a step back. We need to think reasonably and logically and understand that this is for our benefit.
Boy, you must get into some pretty intense exchanges at dinner parties. I wish I was there. Raheel, thank you very much for that.
I wish you were a fly on the wall. You would love it.
I think I would. Thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
He also said he was hoping he would not be invited back to testify more on the Hill. As he left, Newt Gingrich is here now, Fox News political contributor and author of Understanding Trump. Newt, good to see you tonight. Welcome back to the show. What do you make of John Podesta's comment there?
Well, I mean, what's he going to say? Look, I think the whole thing is bizarre. The President of the United States apparently in August was briefed by the CIA that the Russians had been seriously attempting to interfere in the American election. For whatever reason, the president made the decision not to tell the American people, not to tell the two presidential candidates, who would, by the way, I think both have roundly condemned it. I think you could have had Trump and Clinton on the same side, vigorously condemning Putin, saying it was totally unprecedented, no matter who it was going to help. And I think it would have been a much healthier, cleaner thing. I've said I think the president should come up, President Obama should come up and testify. When did he learn? Who did he learn from? Who did he get in his advisors? Why would they keep it secret from the American people for 5 months? And frankly, the things they did to retaliate were pathetically weak, which was, of course, the Obama model in foreign policy. But I think if this was a serious effort, if the CIA believed it was and the NSA believed it was a serious effort, I think they should have had a public American confrontation with Putin, and they would have had both presidential candidates behind him. Instead, we've had this whole fiasco of 6 months of worrying about Trump and collusion, and none of which gets proven. And then we finally discover, oh, President Obama really knew about this almost a year ago. That's just unconscionable.
You wrote a piece yesterday saying the numbers don't lie. Mueller is hunting, talking about the people that he's hired, the lawyers that he's hired, and you feel that their background points to a very political bent for them, and it all goes in the Clinton direction. So the first question I have for you about that is, given this new part of this whole spotlight, turning back on the Obama administration and asking how they dealt with this information, when at that point it was, pretty much everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, and they decided not to come out and talk about it, and that does deserve a question for the president. But is that going to change Mueller's investigation? This newer sort of angle to all of this?
Well, look, Mueller's investigation has nothing to do with Russia. Russia was the excuse to appoint Mueller. Mueller's going to go after obstruction of justice. He's going to go after perjury. He's going to go after financial problems. Mueller's out on a hunt to try to get to the president. It has nothing to do with the original Russian story, and you can tell that by the people that he hired. And let me be clear about numbers. I thought it was amazing that among those people who donated in the Justice Department, 97% donated to Clinton and 3% donated to Trump. However, in
why is that
Mueller's
surprising,
law firm,
given the fact that it was the Obama Justice Department?
Wait. Well, just because it proves how liberal the base is. But in the law firm Mueller came from, it was 99 0.81% for Hillary and 0.19% for Trump. Now, in that cultural environment, why would any Republican be relaxed or comforted? Why would any independent be relaxed or comforted? Yeah. That sounds like such a steep bias that it's inevitably going to be a problem.
So
but
he's not really made any effort. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Different.
He hasn't really made any effort, you're saying, to have any appearance that this is a sort of even-handed investigation group that he's hired.
You know, it would have been simple. Hire one pro-Trump lawyer for every pro-Clinton lawyer. People would not have had much complaint. That's not what's happened. He actually hired a lawyer who was a lawyer for the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, he has such
how can you expect any Republican to relax in that circumstance?
Stephen, we'll bring you into this discussion. What do you think of the idea of letting Obamacare live for another year or so, go through that midterm election in 2018 with Obamacare so that the Democrats can't run on Trump care?
Well, I got to slow down to go fast here, Eric, you know, because I'm not as smart as everybody else at this table. I try to represent, like, the guys that had to become actors from Long Island, okay? But in a post-9/11...
You and your three brothers, basically.
Sure, something, yes, Kennedy. But in a post-9/11 George W. Bush economy, et cetera, then comes Obamacare. This is going to take time. This is going to take time. The struggle between the left and the right about BAS is that what's unfortunate to me is all you continue to hear in the messaging from those that oppose President Trump is negative, 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 and that just keeps helping him and hurting them. So if it's got to go a year, Eric, it's got to go a year.
Got to go a year, Leo. I love playing the politics end of this and letting Obamacare fester for another year. Sorry, a lot of people, I get it, are going to pay a lot more, but then you don't lose the House in 2018 anymore because you keep tattooing the Democrats with Obamacare, and then you work on it after that.
See, Eric, that's a political strategy. If you wait a year, you sign the death warrant to the changing, repealing, and replacing Obamacare. If the Republican Senate do not get this passed this year, it will never get passed. You got a majority in the House. You got a majority in the Senate. For 6 years, Republicans talked about replacing Obamacare. And you're telling me with this majority they can't do it? That tells you that there's a tension and a fight within the Republican Party. The fundamental question is simply this. Does the Republicans believe in assisting people with health care with government assistance? That's the war that you have.
Well, you're right. And there's a divide on the right. How much? Yes, but to what extent? How much assistance is too much? How much assistance is not enough?
And which people do you help? I mean, that is a fundamental question, because the problem with Obamacare is it seeks to help everyone with one-size-fits-all insurance. That is failing. There aren't enough healthy people in the system to prop it up. It's a Ponzi.
Okay, then you had your 6 years. Fix it. You got the majority. The fundamental problem, again, is this. Do Republicans believe, like Rand Paul and conservatives, in any government involvement? I will submit to you that President Trump wants it, and he's having problems with his own party. This is a Republican
Leo,
problem.
I think that's a very fair point. I think it demonstrates just how far apart the GOP is on it, right? So you've got certain people that are more moderate. Their constituents, they just need it, quite frankly. They need some of this government assistance that you're talking about. But then you have the more conservative, the more Puritan part of the base, the Ted Cruz, the Rand Pauls, that are not going to be satisfied. They can't go to their constituents and say this Obama plus, Obama light, whatever you want to call it, is their answer to what I would submit as a 7-year promise that they've made to their American base as well.
Let me throw one thing at you. I want to get to the soundbite because this will blow your mind in a second. But, Stephen, if you're a Republican senator who may be against this bill, do you want to be tattooed with this moniker? Oh, so you don't want this Republican bill, therefore you want Obamacare to stay.
It's like I said, I'm going to keep it as blue collar as I can in my mind. You know what I mean? It's a war. It's exactly like you just said.
Yeah.
It's going to take time. Now, either some members of this Republican Party are going to have to come back around because to avoid what you just said is the inevitable. You wait too long, it ain't going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
So I think you just have to... President Trump's the kind of guy that he's talking directly to the American people now. So it's on them. It's on Rand Paul and these other people to do something.
To you, if the president tables this and says, you know what, I think it was a mistake to move forward on this kind of first amongst the big policy challenges, let's do tax reform, is there a political cost to that?
I think there is, but not as great as it would be if you put the bill forward and premiums continue to rise and Democrats go into town halls all summer long prior to 2018 election going, look, this is worse than what we had for you. How can you not flip that the House.
Eric,
I think that's a bigger
But premiums are going to continue to rise this year, 2018 by 20%,
Right.
and that's the CBO score
Right.
on this. But you make a good point, Stephen. This is a war, and what do you fight for in a war? You fight for freedom. So allow people to have freedom to get insurance across state lines. Allow people to make greater choices to have limited insurance if that's what they want, and perhaps that's what some of those 15 million want by opting out of government-run health care.
I have the ultimate question. I want to get Eric and Kennedy on this. Should the government be involved in health care?
No.
See, there it is.
No,
Eric, can I get you on the record on this?
You can get me on the record.
Okay.
I think
that's different than asking if there should be violence. That's
Leo, this
different
is a purely libertarian point of view that you just heard. No government is better in all forms.
Right.
I would say I'm somewhere in between purely libertarian and conservative, where some government, some assistance, but certainly not to the extent that we're giving away the House on this bill. I don't like this bill.
And Ebony would agree. That's called vague and being ambiguous.
No. My question, I'm going to let you get to it, Eric, but my question is, Kenny, you talked about the going across state lines, and a lot of people have said that is indeed the solution to bringing down the, or a solution. But it is mysteriously absent in both the House and the Senate's versions of these bills. Can someone on this panel tell me why?
Because it hurts
It's a
the insurance
reconciliation
companies.
bill.
Because it hurts insurance companies.
No, that's why.
Because they have to compete. When you compete, prices go down. When prices go down, their profit margins get skinnier. That's the true.
Why.
In
that's
all
the
three forms of this,
honest.
whether it's the ACA, the AHCA, or the Senate version, it's all crony capitalism. This is all a big entitlement, not for Americans, not those most in need, but for these gigantic insurance companies. And they are in a death spiral. They are desperate. And that's why you're seeing companies like Anthem saying in a desperate last stand, okay, we like this version. We'll stay in some of these exchanges.
I want to get to this, Kennedy, and Ebony, and the panel. Here's what. So in order for this to work, I think you need bipartisan support. I think you need Republicans and Democrats to come together. I'm not counting on it.
But it would be nice.
But it would be nice.
Yes.
When you listen to something like this, you realize that's asking a whole heck of a lot. Take a listen to this.
I know this is a sensitive issue, but I'm going to raise it. And that is that the horrible and unspeakable truth is that if this legislation were to pass, thousands of our fellow Americans every single year will die.
We do know that many more people, millions, hundreds of thousands of people will die if this bill passes.
1,000 to 2,000 people will die if you cut 750,000 people from Medicaid. So that means you're killing 1,000 to 2,000, killing them.
All right, Ebony,
that's rational.
How are we going to get to the middle here and fix this problem if we have Democrats? Pelosi saying hundreds of thousands of people will die if you go with the GOP plan.
Well, they obviously all read their DNC talking points memo this morning. Also, quite frankly, I think Senator Sanders would be better served worrying about his own legal and pending problems, quite frankly, and really shouldn't be the messenger on this.
Thousands of people, Bernie Sanders says. Pelosi says hundreds of thousands. Kennedy, Schumer says, hey, 1,000 to 2,000.
You know what? At least they're not employing any hyperbole at all. So no exaggeration, no hysteria. You know what the crazy thing is? We're all going to die. And they can't predict. There's no way, unless they're absolutely psychic and have a party line to heaven, they don't know who's going to die or when or how many people. I mean, that is such a fool's errand trying to quantify something that serious and grave.
They even dusted off that old commercial, throwing Granny off the cliff. They reran that again with Granny being tossed off the cliff. Granny's not going anywhere. Granny's not getting pulled off of health care.
Ebony's absolutely correct. These are talking points. The Democrats should sit on their hands, close their mouth, let the Republicans fight this among themselves, and that's what's happening today.
That is good political strategy. I would not argue with that political strategy, Leo. Your thoughts, Stephen, on the hyperbole here? Hundreds of thousands of people are going to die.
I mean, if pushing Granny off the cliff again isn't a sign of these folks having to kind of rehash some old videotape, just to try to make their point. Listen, the more they oppose this president, negatively bash him, try to create all kinds of news that's going to scare people, Americans now know the truth. They're seeing through it. In time, all of this forward motion by President Trump is going to come to fruition over time.
And Ebony, sometimes the saying, the phrase is when your opponent is digging themselves into a hole.
Just let them.
Just let them?
Just let them.
And
Yeah, I think Leo's advice would be very well served right now. Democrats are doing more harm than good to themselves by coming out in this kind of desperate, obviously a pathetic, quite frankly, way. Let the GOP fight this internally. Hopefully they come up with something that's better for the American people. If they don't, then I think Stephen's right. It just won't get done, because if it doesn't get done, I think in the next year and a half, I think it's going to be very, very difficult, because that's been the criticism of Obama, right? I don't think he seriously took the advantage that he had that first 2 years to heart, and he paid, I think his presidency paid the price for it.
Yeah, and pushing it through unanimously, not with zero Republican votes in the House and the Senate. Your thoughts before we go? Ready to go?
No, I mean, it just shows how hyper-partisan this is. I don't think Democrats and Republicans will ever work together, not on health care.
But maybe on tax reform and maybe on infrastructure. Maybe we can only hope. All right.